Hey, welcome back to the Real Estate Excellence Podcast. Today's guest is the powerhouse Northeast Florida's real estate market and a woman whose career spans 5 states, multiple industries, and a commitment to excellence at every level. With over a decade at General Motors Acceptance Corporation, she rose through the ranks and ultimately landed at GM headquarters in Detroit. From there, she launched Panache Interiors across 3 different states, combining business acumen with an eye for elegance. She's also a published author, writing a guide to help families navigate through the complex adoption process, a book that earned shelf space at Barnes & Noble. Now she's among one of the top 1% of agents in Northeast Florida, multi-year Pinnacle award winner, certified luxury home marketing specialist, and relocation expert. She's earned her place in the $1 Million Guild. She continues to dominate the luxury and executive housing space, all while staying rooted in the service, professionalism, and giving back through her work with community hospice and other organizations. Her reputation for world-class client care, negotiation expertise, and relentless drive makes her a force in the Jacksonville market, and someone you'll want to watch if you're serious about building a standout real estate business. Let's welcome to the show, Sharon Mills.
Well, thank you.
Thank you
for having me.
Glad we finally got together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Some rescheduling and
rescheduling,
office
exactly.
changes and everything else going on. But you've got a lot of, I think this is a really great episode for the every agent that's out there, because I think you touch on the corporate world. You also you were an entrepreneur before getting into real estate,
Yes.
and then obviously almost 20 years. I mean, I started my mortgage career in September of 2005. You started in April, according to your LinkedIn.
Of 06.
06, okay.
Yes,
All right,
yes.
so you're closing in
Yes.
quickly here on 20 years
Yes.
as well.
Yes.
So, tell us a little about where you're from. What was young Sharon even envisioning as a career at 18, 19, 20 years old?
Okay. I'm actually from Buffalo, New York, and moved to Jacksonville back in 2004, but spent most of my younger life in Buffalo, New York. And actually, my first job was at 16. I went to, at my high school, they started a new program, a pilot program, where they picked 2 students from the entire high school. And at that time, Liberty Mutual came up with a concept of, why don't we hire people in high school, and then when they go on to college, we'll pay for their college and keep them on as employees.
Right.
And so I was very fortunate to be selected to be one of those students. Myself and
Interesting.
and a younger gentleman, Mark Zimmerman, which I haven't talked to in years, and I keep saying I'm going to look him up. But that was such a wonderful start to my career, when I had friends that were, working at stores or, restaurant chains and things like that. To go into the business world taught me very early what that world looked like and the possibilities.
It just rings, with our current society now and so forth. And you talk about the kids going to college and creating all this debt and not knowing what they want to do. 16 years old, what was Liberty Mutual having you do?
I was what they called a credit clerk. I went in to handle some of their credit problems for people who weren't paying insurance. They taught me to make phone calls and talk to people if they needed assistance and being delayed on their insurance payments and filing and bookkeeping. And fortunately for me, I think the job was initially going to be that you would be filing, and I guess they saw something in me that said, you know what, we can give her more responsibility. And it's funny, my mother, when people have met her in life, my mother has said, she's been an adult since she was 5 years old. Like, I've just been very forward thinking and
Right.
have just always taken life very seriously. And I'm very happy and very fortunate that people saw that early on. So they gave me probably more responsibility than they had intended for a high school student. So
I just think that's amazing. I think more companies
Yeah.
should do that. That's just that, to reach down and pick the best of the best. And obviously, my wife was part of that with Alltel when she graduated from Florida State. They were hiring the cream of the crop, and then they moved you all around the company because they eventually figured you would be an executive,
Right,
and
right.
they wanted you to have know what all the call center to retail, all these places, and to have that kind of experience. So how long did you end up staying there?
I actually stayed there for about 2.5 years. And it's funny, I've talked to friends about in life, and again, I think when you show up and give your best in whatever it is that you do, I actually stayed there for about 2.5 years. And then my next job, I've actually never interviewed for a job. Like, I've never had to go out and interview. And this is where I think it's so important for people to understand people are watching you even when you don't realize they're watching you. And so, having had that job at Liberty Mutual, I was very involved in my church, and there was a lady there who ran a medical facility, and she just saw my dedication and just heard some different things about me, and actually came to me. And actually, I want to say I was probably 19. She actually came to me and asked me where was I working, and we kind of talked about that. And she asked me what I was making, and she said, and when I told her, she asked me if I would like to come and work for her. And she says, I need somebody in this somebody assisting in an accounting department position. And so, I said, well, something to talk about, certainly. But when she did more than match the salary, then I left and I went there. And this is a very funny story. So I went to work for her, and I worked for her for about 1.5 years. And again, being involved in my church, this is really funny. There was a young man from my church who called me. So my General Motors days, I started working for General Motors at about 20 and a half. So there was a young man that called me, and he said, Sharon, he said, I hear that GMAC is hiring. You really should go and interview with them. And I was like, oh, thanks for letting me know. But truly, I was happy where I was. I wasn't that person who just jumped ship, and I'll explain that when I talk about my real estate career. I'm very loyal. And so he brought that to me, and I'll never forget. It was probably a Monday that he said that to me. And so by Thursday, I'm working for this friend of mine. So by Thursday, I thought, oh my gosh, I know I'm going to see him at church on Sunday. And when he asked me if I've ever called, I wanted to be able to say that I called and not lie to him about. So I literally waited till that Thursday, made that phone call to General Motors. And at the time I was told, oh, we're at the end of our interviews. We've already made our selection. And before I got off the phone, and this is where I think, again, when you position yourself, you just never be open to an opportunity. And so right before I hung up the phone, and I'm thinking, okay, great, I can hang up the phone and I'll just be able to tell him that I followed through. And at the end of the conversation, the gentleman on the phone said, wait, can you get out here today? Are you able to come here today for the interview? And I said, well, I'm not sure.
You're on the spot
I'll try.
now.
I'm on the spot.
Yeah.
But I said, I'll try. Went to my supervisor, who had also become a friend. And timing is everything. Went to her and said, I had not planned on leaving. This is what happened. Long story short, she confided to me that they were having some issues with the medical facility, and it looked like they were going to be closing. That, just the timing.
Happen.
Just timing.
Yeah.
And so she said, go ahead for the interview and just see what happens. Long story short, went for the interview, got the job, and then did almost 14 years with General Motors, with GMAC. Yeah.
If I go back on your timeline, you're very young 20s, and you spend 14 years with General Motors. Tell us some of the things that you've taken from that experience in corporate America, and obviously you eventually opened your own interior design business. What were some of those things you've taken, and obviously taken on to real estate as well? But because I imagine GMAC, they're sending you the trainings, or all these mentorship programs. If you're staying with them, they understand you need to keep moving forward.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And GMAC was a wonderful experience for me. And being from Buffalo, New York, I actually met my husband. I was married for 30 years, divorced, but I actually met my husband, who also worked for MIC, the insurance side of GM. And back then, 30 years ago, GMAC, every GMAC office had an insurance office inside of it. And so certainly taking that training, I would say what really, for me, I really feel like that was totally the foundation for the woman I've become today in business. And I remember we did something back then, years ago, called the Strawberry Tapes. And you had to go through like 6 weeks of these strawberry tapes of training about customer service. And that is a job that I can say it's really helped me in every area of my life.
Yeah.
Just the customer service piece of it, because it's not just customer service, it's people service. It's people service, knowing how to treat others, knowing how to anticipate the needs of others. You know, back then the customer is always right, when of course we know they're not always right, right? But it certainly teaches you diplomacy and how to handle certain situations. And so the reason my career was 14 years and I ended up going to somewhere else, my career was 14 years because my ex-husband and I were both on the same path. So I'm from Buffalo, New York, left Buffalo, New York, and we moved to GM, and we both worked at the GM building. And at that point, once we left the GM building, you could not work for the same company if you were married back then. GM would not allow it. So I had a very great career while we were in Detroit at the corporate offices. At one point, then he was transferred as vice president back to the East Coast. And that's when I had to leave because there was no job for me. Underneath him, he handled, 15 or 20 offices. And of course, I couldn't work under any of those. Right. And that's when I decided okay, so now what's my next step? And that's how the interior design business.
What's interesting, you made me think of when I was in corporate America and telecommunications and the trainings. I always remember being like a store manager. You know, they sent you the trainings like how to interview someone. And obviously it sounds like the customer service part of it resonated with you. You just like, hey, this makes total sense. And because I think if you don't totally get it, it never really sinks in.
Right.
But if you're like, oh, wow, all of a sudden your mind's, and then you just start taking that in. And I still remember today, you know, the trainings, some of the trainings on how to interview people, which has helped me in interviews, you know, because I've done the jujitsu on them, reversed it back on them, and how you can take that. Yes. So, did you always have a fancy for interior design? Was that something you just kind of hobby?
You know what, this, and again, when I said I've never interviewed, how life, I think when you're open to life and open to opportunities, and one thing I have to say is, first of all, my faith, very strong faith. And so I am just that person who believes anything is possible. If you apply yourself, and certainly there's a higher being for me and all of that. Like, I cannot speak to who I am without saying that. But the other thing that I want to say is not just General Motors and other companies. I have always been a visionary. I've always been a visionary. I've always had plans. I've always had dreams. And I thank God that my parents, no matter how big that dream was, and we've talked about this over the years, and I've since lost them both in 2023 and 2024. But both my parents were just amazing parents. I think back in a time when kids were not dreaming as large as I would dream. I had a sister and brother, and they were like, oh, whatever. You know, my parents would always say, you know what, my mother, and again, we've had talks about this as I've gotten older, but my mother would always say, she said, you know what, if you think you can, you can. That was always her favorite line. It didn't matter what I said to her. Mom, you know, when I get older, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. And she goes, you know what, if you think you can, you can. And I thank them to this day, because I do see a lot of parents and a lot of people, you don't realize how your words impact other people. And that's so crucial. And I think that's why the customer service piece of General Motors, and even the jobs before that, just believing that you show up as the best person that you can be. You know, on this earth, you show up as the best person that you can be. And everything that you should have, I think, will find you. You know, but you have to put yourself out there. And I'm a big proponent of you reap what you sow. Yeah. You know, and that's something, again, maybe from my earlier church days, that's something that's always stuck with me. Yeah. You reap what you sow. And I tell people, you can't plant corn and then reap peas. If you plant corn, you're going to get corn. If you plant envy, you're going to get envy. Yeah. If you plant gratitude, you're going to get gratitude.
100%.
And for me, regardless to what, and I think anybody can attest to this that knows me, I am not that agent or that person. I'm always trying to push people ahead. I don't have to be the only one. It's impossible to be the only one, right? And so I do think with our business, and I try to tell younger people, run your own race, right? There's good, healthy competition, but I don't ever compete. Oh, this person's number one, and I've got to beat them out.
They're at a different chapter in their career many times.
But so many people, you spend your time, we spend our time trying to be like, oh, how did she get that? Or how did he get that? To me, that has always been a waste of time, right? I am my own competition. If I am number one at whatever I do, great for me. If I am not number one at whatever I do, it's not the other person's fault. It's what we put into it, whether you're running any type of race. So to be envious, and I think for me, that's the biggest thing.
I use the phrase, every dog has its day. And you can get upset, hey, this person just started the business and they're killing it. Okay. But, you and I have been in the business long enough. We've seen a lot of flashes in the pan.
Sure.
And it's usually because they're cutting some corner, and then the corner comes back around and nips them in the tail.
Right.
Or if you and just in life, if you could get upset that someone did something. Oh, why is someone getting that? And I've done all this work. Trust me, sit back. Yours will come at the right time, because I believe he has the right time for you to receive that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then that, even with that, while you're waiting for your time to come, the energy spent on how did somebody else get it, that's taking energy from what could I be doing. And true to that point, when I started, first of all, I'm from Buffalo, New York, lived in Detroit, Michigan headquarters, then Rochester, New York, Carmel, Indiana, Medina, Ohio, and then on here to Jacksonville.
So you know how to shovel snow.
Yes, I know how to shovel snow. So I'm loving the sunshine.
Yeah.
But 2004, I moved to the state. 2004, the first year, 2004, we were building a home with Arthur Ruttenberg. So the first year, I didn't know anybody. I was so busy. I was a project manager on the job because we couldn't keep contractors there. So I would literally go there every day and just sit there. So I would probably say the first year I didn't meet a lot of people. And so 2006, started getting out there. But 2006 is when I actually got into the business. And at the time, I want to say I got licensed in January of 2006, but I didn't start the business until May or June, because I was waiting for our daughter, who was in high school, for us to present her with a car so she'd get herself to all of her functions. And by that time, the market had started crashing. And so most people would have stopped, and several people said, why would you get in now? Like, stop and wait for it to come back.
Right.
I stayed the course, and so, I worked for Watson Realty. I stayed the course, and Watson had, 1,000, 2,000 agents. I literally would show up to that office every single day. When I say, and we all know what 2006, 2007, 2008 was like. It was like a ghost town. Nothing was selling. I got out of my bed and I went to that office every single day. And I sat there and I thought, I'm in real estate and I'm reading all our Florida Realtor magazines and doing various things like that to just apply so that I would really understand the craft that I was now going into. And I just used my time wisely for something like that. And so by my fourth year in a down market, I was number 9 in Watson throughout the whole region. And so that, people say it's luck or whatever. It was really just dedication. And that's the thing. If you stay dedicated and if you work your business, and I say this to younger agents, and even for those of us that get older and we burn out, you have to have a passion for what you do, and you have to keep reinventing yourself. And this is one business where if there's not flexibility, you're not going to make it, right? Because we've seen how many different markets since 2007, 2008. 100%. So I think I bounce back pretty quickly, and I don't take things to heart. I put the goal in front of me, and sometimes you have to jump over some hurdles to complete that goal. But I think if you have a plan, and if you know how you're trying to get there, sometimes you have to deviate and you take a different road than you thought you would take. But as long as you stay consistent, I just think you can do whatever you want.
Well, I think that whole phrase, if you stay in line long enough, you'll eventually get to the front. Now, that doesn't mean you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. You were going in and trying to move your real estate education, whatever. You were moving the needle one way or another. Whether you're getting more educated every day, or I would imagine, you entered in a market that's already on a down, that you didn't know what it was like in 2004, and values going up and people just running around, like crazy with the real estate. You didn't know any better. I imagine you had to dwell a little bit into the REO. You had to learn how to do some short sales.
Short sales,
you had to, because that's an education itself.
Right.
Working that, and those deals don't happen overnight.
No.
Some of them, you could start off at a minimum of 6 months, maybe never closes.
Right. Absolutely, and that was what was going on. A lot of that was going on. But I remember thinking, if I stay the course and you work through that, and it's funny, getting into the business, I remember thinking when I first got in, oh my gosh, if I got 5 deals at one time, would I be able to work? How could I handle that? And I tell you, after going through the down market and the short sales and just learning everything, that just having so many things thrown at you at one time, I just remember thinking, oh, now bring it on. Like, bring that customer on, bring the 100 deals on, whatever. It just took the fear. It took the fear out of it.
Yeah.
And one thing I have to say, going back to giving credit, my General Motors days, I had one of the most difficult bosses that I had ever had, that I've ever worked with. And to this day, love this man, and I won't say his name, but to this day, love him. But the challenges and the dotting all your I's and crossing all your T's, and he had executives working for him. He was a regional manager, and he had executives working for him who made 10 times my salary. But when those reports would come in, I'll never forget, he had 21 offices under him. And so they would send in these reports every month. And if one number was off, and if they were called our branch highlights, and they were probably 10 pages long. And so now, mind you, these executives making 10 times more than me, like, this work is so far above my level that when I would give him the reports, he would say to me, you didn't catch this? Why didn't you catch it? Like, he could look at it. And so I learned to look at everything and look at everything very closely. And I remember being furious with him, just being furious and thinking, you're not paying me enough to do this. And if they sent it in wrong, why are you upset with me? But I can tell you that was the absolute foundation, because I've had many of my customers say to me, a lot of my millionaire customers, and I have a couple billionaire customers, and one of the highest compliments I had a billionaire customer say to me once, and he was a very difficult customer to work with, but he was a businessman, and I just got him. But I'll never forget, at the closing table, he looked at me, and when I mean he pushed, and sometimes to the point of being unfair for the other side. And so I would say, I hear what you're saying, but I respectfully disagree. And, and you'd have to be, again, diplomacy is everything. But I remember at the closing table, he said to me, you know what, Sharon Mills? He said, you're all right with me. He says, and you're so all right with me that if I wasn't already me, I'd want to be you. And if I tell you, and his wife looked over and she said, you need to write this date and this time down. She said, because I've been married to him for 30 years and he has never, ever, he won't give a compliment even if it's due. She said, but to hear him say that, and it's, again, that having that balance, but also going in knowing what you're talking about. And it's like, people want to come into the market and they, want to start 100,000 or $1 million, or is it harder working with the 2 million? It doesn't matter what level, just know your craft. Like, you have to know your craft. And once I was at a seminar, and something that helped me, again, very early on, I was at a seminar and the gentleman said, and this is early on in my career, maybe my second year, and the gentleman said, the speaker said, if you want to know the difference between the people that are making money and the people that aren't making money, he said, test your own self. He said, I want you to imagine for 1 week that you have your customer sitting in a back seat. And sitting in your back seat with you all day for 1 week. And you tell me, if when that customer got out of that car, if he thought you were a real estate agent or a grocery shopper or picking up your clothes from the laundry, what would you do different if that person were in your back seat? And that was really
I'm trying to catch that. It's
So the point
Yeah.
the point he's making is, if you're a real estate agent and if that's your profession, is that what you're working on all day?
ah,
Because for most of us, you know what, we
Okay.
go see the customer, then we run to the grocery store. We go see a customer, and then we're picking up our laundry.
Right.
And then, you know what, the sun is shining, so now we're going to go to the beach. And so for me, even when the market was down and I said I would go to the office every day, I remember having that conversation with myself and saying, wait a minute, if I worked for General Motors, would I have the option, because the market is down, not to go into that office?
right.
So I had to treat my business, although I love having flexibility, I had to treat my business as it is a corporation.
I love this. All right, so let's take this a little deeper, because I think this is very important for that. Again, someone starting the business, or someone maybe in the business 3 or 4 years, maybe is just hanging on. Is like you just said, when we see it on social media a lot, right? It's in the middle of Wednesday and they're out at the beach. Maybe they're rewarding themselves, hopefully, because they
Right.
just may had a closing. Maybe it's their little reward is to go to the beach.
Right.
I don't, we should do things like that, but that you need to come in and put your 8 or 9 hours of focused time, just like you would be if you were going into General Motors.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I've spoken to younger agents, and the agents will. And my first question is, when they call me to ask me a question, or how'd you get in the business? And I said, well, why did you get in the business? And they're like, you know what? I just want my time to be my time. I like the idea of just being flexible. And I said, you know what?
It's not the business
That's
for
the,
you.
that's the wrong answer. And I
Yeah.
said, that is the wrong answer. And I said, and that's why most people don't succeed, because they assume that your time is your time. When you're working for yourself or a brokerage, we're still independent contractors. So you're still building the business
Yeah.
yourself. You have very little time. If you're trying to get your business off the ground, you have very little time. And as far as taking the time off, I very early on, and certainly now I structure it, but when I first got in the business, usually on Sunday, I would decide what was going to be my one day off. I'd kind of look at my book of business, what was happening, what was not happening back in that time. And I would say, you know what? I think Wednesday this week, I'm going to take off. If I want to go to the beach, want to hang out, go to a movie or whatever. But I would absolutely regulate myself. It wasn't like, oh, today the sun is shining, so let me go off and do what I want to do. And that's, if people would really look at how much actual time they spend on their business, they would know why it matches their level of success.
Right. You make me actually just put on another reel from Carrie Carpenter. She was in corporate America. She was a project manager. She's only been in the business since 2000, but one of the things we talked about in the show is treating it like a business. She knew right away she needed to treat it like a business. We get so many self-employed people also have to, and obviously you were kind of leading into it. You're self-employed. You're on call 24/7 because if you ain't killing, you ain't eating.
Right.
Right. So you got a customer calls at 8 o'clock. You're taking that call.
Right.
So there's certain things that need to be done. What are some of the things that you try to schedule, or I imagine you're leading into, you kind of regiment your day that you're going to accomplish these things, or how do you do that?
When getting into the business, again, I looked at my business as a more of a corporate structure. And so my family, when I first got in the business, family and friends used to be very annoyed, because I get up in the morning at 6 o'clock. I probably don't stop till 10. But that's not all business, I'll tell you. I probably don't stop till 10. But the one thing that I did is, again, I remember most corporations, even companies now, they do not allow you on the phone all day just chit-chatting. And so what was very hard for my friends and family to understand when I first got in the business, including my mother, father, everybody, from 8 to 5. One we called you and you didn't answer the phone. And I said, from 8 to 5, I am not answering the phone. All my family's in Buffalo or out of town. If you call me back 3 times, if you send, there's a 911, and a 911 means somebody's in the hospital, and it was not something I can deal with after 5.
Right.
But I remember people getting upset, but I really had to stay the course, because if you take that call at 12 o'clock from this friend you haven't talked, that's an hour that I could be talking to my customers, or that's an hour that I can get something else done so I can finish up my day. So when I first started, my days ran long. I mean, I would be working from 6 o'clock to midnight. However, being in the business 20 years, again, I have reset and readjusted, because now that I've been in the business 20 years, I had to come to a place where you have to have work-life balance. So for me, if I give it my all from 8, whether I'm making phone calls to customers, visiting customers, doing a photo, meeting a photographer at a home, going on a listing appointment, taking a seller out, that my day is pretty much structured to be doing that, probably up until 6 o'clock. After 7 o'clock, and I would answer the phone at 7 o'clock, 10 o'clock, whatever. I finally had to learn some work-life balance, because I can't call my cardiac surgeon or my doctor at 10 o'clock at night just for a chit-chat. I think I'm feeling something. Call and make an appointment for tomorrow. So I had to also look at it as a business and help my customers understand, I am here for you all day. But at 10 o'clock, 8 o'clock, and usually 7 o'clock, unless I'm negotiating, 7 o'clock is pretty much my cutoff. And even my phone message says, your call will be returned today or within 24 hours.
Is it, you use the term work-life balance, which I think a lot of people can get confused with that, because you and I know, and I truly believe there's some experts who have actually come out and said there's no such thing.
Right. Right.
But really what you're doing is you're setting some boundaries.
Some boundaries.
Hey, this is how we're going to do business.
Right.
And unless it's a 911,
right,
after 7 o'clock, I'm not answering the phone.
After 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
And absolutely, because I have a family, and so, when I'm on till 10 o'clock, with customers, answering questions that I cannot do anything about until the next day, then it's taking from their time. So certainly, you and I both know, there's certainly not a 50-50 work-life balance. I'm sure I'm 70-30, but I had to throw that 30 in there. Otherwise, you're not going to have a family. So when I say that's what I'm referring to. And so usually after 7 o'clock, like I say, if I'm not in negotiations, I will return the call the following day.
Yeah.
Because, and most of my customers, they're business people, they understand that. So I think that is something, and I want to say, even though I've been in 20 years, I want to say probably at the 5-year point, I really restructured that. And my customers...
How do you express that to your customers? How do you get them to understand that this is how we're going to do business?
You know what? I literally tell them, like, you know what? And this is something else I do. Even when I have listed homes for friends, and this is funny, and I didn't even realize this was happening, but over the years, like when I go to a customer's house and we have a listing appointment, typically we're at the dining room table, the kitchen table, or something. I have had friends whose homes I've slept at, we've taken trips together. When we talk about business and I'm coming to list their home or somebody, automatically we go to the dining room table. I'm not on the sofa in the family room where we hang out. Business is business, and most people understand that. And so I think when I go in and I present myself as a business professional, and back...
It's game time now.
It's game time. It's game time.
Yeah.
But back, probably 2 years into the business, the Times Union had done an article, where they would ask people to do articles, or real estate agents to do an article. And I remember doing an article, and shortly after I got into the business, and the article I called it "Try on a Realtor for Life." Try on a Realtor for Life. And that whole article, for me, was about how important your real estate, one of your largest investments, but just like people should have a financial planner, your cardiologist, your doctor, your dentist, or whatever, you should have a real estate professional that you're building a relationship with. And that's kind of how I saw it from the structure of how I wanted my business structured. And I can tell you that's exactly how it's played out. I've got customers that I've sold their homes, I've sold their parents' homes, I've sold their children's homes, and that article literally resonated with so many people because somebody said, like, I never thought of it like that. Like,
right.
I never thought of it like that. And I remember, in particular, 2 things that happened. Somebody from Las Vegas called and said, I don't even know how their article got in Las Vegas from the Times Union, but said, oh my God, I read your article, and had some comments on that. And then there was a gentleman out of Atlanta, And at the time, he had the largest brokerage, and I can't recall his name because it's been a while. He had the largest brokerage in Georgia, and he said, I just had to call to compliment you on that article. I have been in this business, and he said, I'm the largest, whatever, and told me the name of the company. And I did verify that. And he said, I think he had something like 20 brokerages under him. And he said, I have been for years trying to convey what you put in one article. And he called to ask my permission to be able to run it in their newspaper, giving me credit, but to run it. And he says, we use this article in all of our training sessions now, because that's how you should think of it. So I think when you go in, thinking of your business as a business, that's what you present to the customer. It's not like, oh, can I sell your house? And I think having that confidence and being clear about what it is you're doing, because there are people, we've talked about compensation and things like that, and if you don't know your value, then certainly people try to talk you down.
I've often, I've brought it up on the show many times, is I think a lot of agents, when they first, especially when they first get in, they only are looking maybe 60, 90 days in advance. That, being the lifetime realtor, just, whether you go to the dentist or a doctor, you're getting text messages from them. It's time for your appointment.
Yes. Or,
hey, this is what's going on. You're automatically in their CRM.
Right.
You're going to get them even after you don't go with them for years.
Right.
I got a dentist that still sends me, hey, it's your birthday. How are they? I get a text message, because I'm still in their database. Right. And obviously, maybe I'll go back to them one day, because maybe I'll run out of the dentist. Right. It's kind of my thing. The dentist today, they all want to upsell you. You start upselling me, I'm gone.
Then you're gone.
Yeah, I'm gone. Yeah. But to have that mindset, when did it click for you that, as I always say, that client that's in front of you, that buyer or seller is in front of you, is your walking billboard? If you're spending any money on marketing or any effort on marketing, it should be on that person that's in front of you, because when they have a great transaction with you, hopefully they're going to be your walking billboard.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's why it is so important to know your customer, to know your client, and to know that it's not cookie cutter. And that's the one big mistake that I think we make in real estate is, you send everybody 40 postcards, and every week you send out a postcard, and you're calling their phone every day. Having worked for executives at General Motors and having been in a great position myself, they don't have time for that, right? So I think people, to be in this business, which is a people business, there has to be yes, certainly we do it by the book, and everybody sends out postcards and reaches out to a customer, but that executive, if you call him 4 times a month, there's going to be an issue. There's going to be an issue. So I think we have to know our customer. We have to be a good listener and understand and ask up front, have those conversations up front. What is it you expect from me? What is the best way to contact you? Would you prefer a text? Would you prefer that I email? And especially now with people, when we go in these markets that they're just cyclical and up and down and all around, with some of our customers, like I will say, do you want me, especially if there's nothing going on, do you want that update every Monday? Would you like me to reach out to you every Monday? Many will say, Sharon, I don't want you to reach out to me unless there's something going on. Like a feedback, especially they know the market. So kind of listen to what people are telling you.
And then you're kind of telling them that you want to stay, I'm going to stay in touch with you.
I'm going to stay in touch. What? Every Monday, Monday, Wednesday, I continue this. Some will say, I don't want that. I literally have those conversations up front. When a person gets me as their agent, they clearly know what they're getting. They know what they're getting. They know what I'm going to do for them. They know I'm going to do the absolute best that I can. But most people tell me they are so like, wow, you really listen. You really listen. And I'll take notes on my customers. I listen and know if that person says don't contact me unless something, and certainly
if something changes.
Something changes. Certainly if it goes 30 days and something's not going on because we're in a difficult market, I'm going to reach out and say, hey, just want you to know, still working on things, but I'm not looking for a response back. Just letting them know, just because you said you don't want the feedback, I'm still here for you. Have any questions, anything comes up, I'm here for you. And I think that's so important.
So I'm thinking of an agent who might be listening right now. They might be saying, well, Sharon's been in the business 20 years. She had all this corporate experience at GMAC, working with these high level people. I've been a stay at home mom for the last 10 years. I can't. It becomes natural to you because when you're expressing these things are things that you have compiled over the years, and then you're spilling them out here in 2025 to us, and everyone think like you were doing it from day one. This is stuff that you've learned and just kept adding and tweaking and all these things to your how you did your follow up. I think one of the things that you've said, and I want to kind of drill down on how you would train a fairly new agent. Or someone maybe just doesn't have that corporate structural experience that you've had. When you coming into that buyer consultation, when you're in that listing chat, your presence, you've gathered that presence and that confidence over time. You might have been fairly confident day one, but like you said, you were spending a lot of time learning, so you had that confidence. So in today's market, fortunately, I don't think we're going to have a collapse like 7 and 8 where it's crickets. Things are still moving, and I think we're damming up. I think we get a rate drop I think where we can say 5.875 on a 30-year fix. There's going to be a frenzy, and you're going to be running. But if you were mentoring a younger agent, how would you share with them all this 20 plus, well, really 30 years of experience, because we had 14 with General Motors, and kind of help them get on that path? How would they come in day one if you were tutoring them?
One thing I'd say is education and preparing yourself. Right, there are books out there about everything. So again, although I transferred my corporate experience over to the real estate, I didn't know anything about real estate. So I had to sit there and read real estate, even if they start with their Florida Realtor magazine. Like just reading something like that and hearing, because they have a lot of times they'll have things that went wrong, things that went right, how some other agent is doing something. There are very few things that are new under the sun, as they say, right? And so there are so many books out there for people to learn. And the one I was thinking as you were talking, what is the one that everybody's doing? It's on the tip of my tongue. It was like a big...
It'll come to you.
Campaign, but it'll come to me. Yeah. But I go back to some of the first books that I read, even when I started real estate. I go back to some of the first, like, as the market changes and when things slow down, I am constantly pouring myself into education, and not just real estate education. It's just life in general. Like I'm just one of these people that believe every day you should learn something new. Every day you should learn something new. So even for me, even when you're new, if you have studied your craft and if you have put the time in and you train yourself to speak, it's like we've all gone through college courses. When we went to first grade, we didn't know anything. But by the time you listened, you knew enough to get you on to second grade. So you've got to be doing something while you're waiting for something to happen. It's not, if you don't put it in, you can't pull it back out. Right? So some of it comes innately for some of us. Some of us are just people. I have agents that say, I don't even like people, but I'm in this business. And it's like, but they're still doing well. But it's like what you put in, you get back out. So just sit. I think the mistake that most of us make is that we sit there and just think it's just going to come either innately or it's just going to fall out of the sky. If you are reading something and you can take one thing from what you've learned and apply it, so many different things apply to various areas of life. It's not just real estate, and so that's what I would say to them. It's like reading that Florida magazine. And one thing I do sell a lot of $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $4 million properties, and agents say, I want to be that person. And I said, but when I got in the business, I still have, like, I've got a $200,000 listing right now, $300. It's not the money, because that is that $200,000 to that person. But I tell people, take the time to prepare yourself. And if you want to be $1 million agent, go and know what's in $1 million house, right? I remember transferring to Ohio, and we were supposed to work with a real estate agent. At the time, I wasn't in real estate. We were supposed to work with a real estate agent, and we were buying a substantial house. And I remember we had to change our weekends. We had this guy who was wonderful, but we had to change our weekends. He was already tied up with somebody else, so he sent us a realtor who was working with him. And as we're walking through this house and we're looking, nice as she could be, wonderful person, but she was like, as we're walking through, she goes, 5 bathrooms. Who needs 5 bathrooms? This is her commentary. Who needs 5 bathrooms, right? There was a food warmer in the house. She didn't know what the food warmer was. She didn't know what the central vac was. And it's, for me, I'm a very nice person, and my ex-husband was as well. And I'm going to tell you something. She would have been fired, but she would have absolutely been fired, because I'm thinking with the commission that you make on a house at that price point, and you don't know, and she didn't even realize what she was saying.
Yeah, the sellers heard we're recording that.
Yeah,
they would have
but not only the sellers recording, I'm a buyer, and I'm thinking you're getting ready to make commission off of me, and you don't even know what I'm buying. I'm the one buying the 5 bedroom. So I'm buying this house, so and you're saying who needs 5 bedrooms? Like, that would have been like a like a done deal.
Right.
But what I did is I talked to the agent that she worked for, because she was a lovely young lady. And I said, you know what, her personality, she's an amazing person, but you, before sending her out, you need to teach her what's in that type of home. And that is something I share with other agents, because I said, I don't want to say, oh, you know what, I can sell $1 million homes because I live in a $1 million market. That's great. Certainly you'll have connections there. But if you know what's in it, I said, go to a kitchen store, go to a high-end builder, learn what is there. There are a few people, a lot of people know me, but even back then, there are very few people who said, well, where do you live? What size house do you live in? Now, I could relate, but they knew that when I walked in, I was familiar with, and I could recognize what it was I was trying to sell for them, or what I was either trying to sell to them.
You, a comment was made this weekend. It's not a comment to me, or we were with family, and we were, I forget what exactly, I knew exactly what we were discussing, but the phrase, and it's been used before, content is king. If you've got content, we talk about social media, everyone's immediately listening right now. When I had said content, you immediately think of social media. This podcast creates a tremendous amount of content. But what you're saying in relation to being that, as at the highest level, I call it verbal ammunition. There's different times in my life I've jumped into personal development books than others, and I just felt like I could have better conversations with people, because you're feeding your brain a bunch of content, good content, because a lot of personal development books is positive type stuff. But if you're not listening to someone, whether it's a personal development, maybe by John Maxwell or someone like that, or something real estate that's educating you on, maybe, if you're listening to maybe Bigger Pockets or this podcast, hopefully, and you're not bringing in that content into your brain, you're not preparing yourself, I think is what you're saying. You've got to feed your brain the content.
And you have to feed your brain the content on all levels. Again, like you said, to be socially relevant, just period, right? To be able to hold a conversation in a group. And we did a lot of entertaining when we worked for General Motors. And so you've got all different people from all different walks of life. So if you can't contribute anything to a conversation, and most of what people, certainly getting the education for real estate, but also just that personal growth period, because most of my customers, once we're done with the listing and the signing the sales agreement, we relate on so many other levels. And that is what the people, I think, respect. That is what makes it personal. That's what sets me apart from other people. It's like when you know a little something about and that's not your intent, but they see the growth. They see the growth. They see that you can carry a conversation, which tells them that you can probably relate to other agents who you are working with. You can relate to other customers who you're working with, but you're not just limited to talking about this house. Where are you from? I mean, like, where are you from? Oh, I lived in like, there are just so many different things to be added. But I think it's like, and this is an extreme, but I was one of the few people who back again 20 years ago, because people used to always say real estate agent, and I always, whenever I would write, I would say real estate profession, real estate profession. Now everybody says the real estate profession, but that's what we are, is a profession. And I think for people to see that and really believe that about yourself, it's bigger than just selling a house. It's bigger than just selling a house. And I think, again, like I said, I think that's what most customers appreciate is that they're getting somebody that's well-rounded and aware.
You said something earlier. You were talking about comparing yourself to others, and you should just compete with yourself. And obviously, we think of golf is big around here. That's a sport where you really are competing with yourself. Hey, can I cut a few strokes off from the last time I played? I'm going to go practice, and then I'm going to go out. Can I cut a few strokes off? You're just really competing against yourself. Otherwise, you will go insane.
Right.
Right. And from what I'm getting from what you're saying here is, you really the only person that's holding you back is really yourself. And if you aren't feeding yourself with the proper content, doing those things that you need to be doing. You go in the office, you're working on your marketing. Don't be worried about what someone else is doing. Who knows, maybe they pay a videographer to do really great videos.
Right.
You don't have the money for that right now. So you just need to work on what you're working on. Now, can they listen to this podcast and listen to what you're saying and get from top agents like you some little things that they're doing that they can implement in their business? 110%. Then that's what they need to be. Hey, how do I need to follow up?
Right.
You might not have a customer yet. How do I need to follow up? I'm going to build that into my repertoire.
Right.
But I think some of the great agents have been on. A lot of them, like you said, you set that schedule. From I think you said earlier something like from 6 to 10. Don't.
Yeah.
You're
And it's
lasered in on whatever you need to do.
It's 6 to 5 now. It used to be 6 to 10, but it's 6 to 5 or 6 to 6.
I thought you meant 10 a.m.
Yeah.
I thought every morning you have some regiment.
You know what? I get up at 6 in the morning, and so I have my regiment. I have devotion, and then get my grandchildren off to school. But usually by 8 o'clock, I'm already working on the business. By 8 o'clock, I'm working on the business, and I'll usually know either from 5 to 6. But my workday typically ends at 6 o'clock. Now, if I have a customer that I need to go to 8, but the norm is usually 6. I don't cut off at 6 o'clock and say, hey, I can't show you a property. But I make sure that I am working on something real estate related from between those working hours. And when a customer calls at 5 o'clock, I'm not annoyed because they called because I'm in the middle of dinner. That's what I expect the call. Now, after 6, if I want to start dinner and do things like that. But I hold myself accountable. And that's the thing, again, like I said, some of it comes natural, but if people would really think about, I love the movie The Secret, and I've told several people, just sit down and watch it. You get what you think about. But most of us, if an agent has not been successful, and again, it's not to say everybody's going to be at the same level, but if there's not some level of success, and if you say, I want to be the $1 million agent or the 500,000 or the 200,000, if all you're saying is that's who I want to be, ask, so what am I doing to get there? What steps am I taking? And most could not give you a plan because they don't have a plan.
Well, I want to ask you this, Tito, because I think everyone knows, okay, a customer calls and want to go see a house. You block off that time to go whatever time you're going to go see the house. You got a listing appointment. You set an appointment. You're doing something, driving. You have to prep before you go over there. Hopefully, you're doing your thing. But there's all that other, probably 90% of the other time is this gray area, and that's still working between 8 and 5. But you're not on a direct mission like, hey, I got a listing appointment. Okay, I'm preparing for it. I'm going to drive there. I'm going to get there, do the listing appointment, come back. Obviously, whatever follow up or maybe hopefully you got the listing appointment. You start writing up the contract or whatever, that type of thing. These are things that need to be done. That's fairly simple for most people. It's that gray area when you wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning. You get the kids off to school, and now it's 8 o'clock, and it's like, okay, what do I do? I don't have. Well, I have a showing at 5 o'clock. Okay, I've already done the research. On this home, I know it's in this community, and the fees are this. That 30 minutes. Boom.
Right.
What are you doing for the other part? And I think that's where a lot of agents fall out.
So one thing I will say for the newer agents, because I think it's different for the newer agents what they'd be doing versus what the more
Experienced
veteran agents would be doing.
Yeah.
So when one thing that I think is missing when I got in the business, I spent because mind you, I'm in a new state, moved here in 2004, got in the business in 2006. I can't even tell you. I visited every new construction community. I literally, because I did not know Jacksonville, I would get in my car and I would go just drive the various areas. And we used to have Caravan to help with that because, used to do every Tuesday they were caravans.
Yeah.
Even though there are no caravans now, still get in your car. Like for me to figure out, because again, Florida's pricing was very different from where I came from. So I would literally go drive clear across town. I live close to the beach. But I would drive clear across town. I do a lot of business in Queens Harbor, and everybody thinks I'm the Queens Harbor person. But yeah, and and I'm thankful. But I tell people I just closed St. Johns County, Nocatee, Ponte Vedra. I'm everywhere, and that's the smart thing to do. Not put all your eggs in one basket, because if the market crashes and there's nothing happening in that one location. So again, I was just that person, and I don't know if it came from transferring so many times that I learned to learn my city, but I literally would go through communities. I would make showing appointments just so I knew what what was in a $200,000 house, what was in a $400,000 house. I was always applying myself. So rather you're learning a new agent, learning your MLS. We had MLS classes that you had to go sit through. So many people are not doing that now. They get their license and they're just winging it. You don't know half of what the MLS can do. You don't know how to do a radius search. At one point I had 2 or 3 agents working with me, and those are the types of things. Yes, you can ask me the question, but I didn't have anybody to ask the question. Those are the things I was sitting in the office learning how to do a radius search. I remember writing up contracts. And our contracts is changing constantly. So everybody has this fear about when a contract comes. Make yourself the customer. Write that contract and rewrite that contract and until you know that you have it right, until it becomes second nature to you. And
let me ask you this, because you were mentioning the classes and the contract class. I've said numerous times, it's been a while since I said it, you should be going to numerous contract classes presented by numerous different people, because they all have an area that they feel is more important than another.
Exactly.
Number one. But also, I would imagine you probably went physically to NEFAR or wherever these classes were going on, hearing the other questions, the other agents, and actually interacting with the other agents, talking a little shop to really this whole thing that they want to do it online at home. I can't stand taking a class. We get distracted by everything.
And even the online, some of it's fine and convenient for now, but it's so good sometimes to sit in the room with people to hear the conversations that happen. And another thing that I did frequently with when the market wasn't doing anything, and even when the market started coming back, I would go to seminars in Miami, California, Vegas. I would look for different seminars to go to because I like to be challenged. And so if for Jacksonville, our price point, we don't have that $100 million property, right? So I would actually put myself in a position, I wanted to go in the room and sit with those people in New York and sit with those people from California, because especially after my 4th year, I was 6 figures, I was doing very well, and people were like, oh my gosh, you did great in this short time. And I didn't want to get used to that, because who am I looking to? And there are a couple of agents that I definitely look up to, and it's like, and Jan Shields being one. I love her. I love her. And I remember, even with Jan Shields, I remember looking when I started the business and understanding the numbers that she was doing and asking the question. I didn't even know her, but I remember thinking, wow, to do those numbers, how many people does she have working with her? And at the time, it was one. And I thought, she could do that with one person, because everybody wanted you to think they're teams of 10 people and 15 people, and that was not my vision. That was not what I wanted.
Yeah.
And so I remember looking at that and thinking, you can have one person? What? Wow. So just looking at other people, and again, not from an envious standpoint, but if they've already reinvented the wheel or seeing what they can do can certainly encourage you. And something back to when I first started in the business, when there was not much going on in the market, I was an information source for people. I had people calling me from Maryland. I had people calling me from other states saying, what is a short sale? My cousin is thinking about this. I probably did 2 years of just letting people know, call for information. If I don't have the answer, I'll find it. Because again, when you meet that heart surgeon, you may say, I have a friend that has a few palpitations or what. If that person goes, I don't know what, I don't, you know what I'm saying? So it's not always about the transaction. But those people who I answered questions for, those people who I took the extra step to go and try to find, you know what? And I've always been honest with people, and that's the other thing. Do not try to fluff your way through this, right? If you don't know, that's something with my integrity and honesty, and I go, you know what? I'm not sure about that, but let me
call someone. I always say call someone smarter than me.
Yeah,
when you call someone smarter than me,
let me see what I can find out for you. And so many of those people are the ones that became my customers because they saw that I was about the business. It wasn't about you selling your house. Half the time they weren't even asking questions about their own home. But when it came time to sell, who do you think they called?
They relied on you. You were a resource that made life easy for them.
Right.
I mean, that's real. I mean, what do we ask for services to do, whether it's mow the lawn or anything? It makes what we think it makes our life easier.
Yes.
So you're making life easier. It's a nice,
because
Sharon's easy to talk to. Boom.
If that's my field. Yeah. And funny, back during the 2006, 2007, there was a neighbor, and our neighborhood is huge. There are like over 1,000 homes, but there was a neighbor, and usually when my car was leaving to go to work, he'd be walking his dog. Didn't know him. He lived on a different street. Didn't know him, but smile and wave. And one day he just flagged me down, and he goes, hi, my name is Bruce. And I was like, and I'm Sharon. And he goes, can I ask, what do you do? He says, I'm out here walking early, and it literally is like a ghost town for so many people. So he said, what do you do? And I said, he goes, well, how do you do real estate when there's nothing? And I said, but you know what? Even though we're in a difficult market, there are still people who are going to need to sell their homes. You gather information, things will eventually turn around. I've always been very positive about that. And so one of the things he said, I told my wife, you are the hardest working real estate agent, because I saw him another time.
Right.
And that if we ever sell our house, that's who we're calling. He called me probably 2.5 years later. Said, you probably don't remember me. I was the one that was walking the dog. And I said, of course I remember you. But that's the other piece, I think, for agents. Our customers are looking to us for guidance, for confidence. Are we in a difficult time even now? But if I go to their home and I sit with them and go, this market it's just bad. Like, nothing's moving, whatever. I literally am everybody says I'm an optimist, and I am, but I really believe what I'm saying. Real estate is always going to be real estate. It's cyclical, is going to be up, is going to be down. And something I've said to my customers, and they'll actually, they'll laugh. I have a funny side to me, so they'll laugh. And so I've had people actually stand in one of my waterfront properties and say to me, you've got to show them the positive in it. And they'll say, I don't know, with the market, I just don't know if this is the time. And so, again, finding out somebody's motivation. Well, you know what? You told me that you're trying to get closer to the grandchildren, or whatever the reason is they're moving. Yeah. Let's just say this market stays this way from now, especially if it's something they plan to do a year or 2 years from now. If it's 5 years, this is a maybe, then, maybe it's not the time. Wait it out. But if you told me you're trying to get to your grandchildren before whatever, rather you're sitting there or sitting here, first of all, sitting here, you'd be happier because now you're closer to them. But if it crashes, it's going to crash for all of us. And I would say to them, and what would you rather be looking at? What you're looking at now or that waterfront? And they're like, you know what? I never thought of it that. Yeah. And so we laugh. You end up laughing about it, but it brings people back to center to say life doesn't stop because the stock market went up or went down. If you don't have the funds, that's a whole different conversation, right? You don't have funds. But I tell them, if it's only your house that's having the challenge, but if the whole country is having a challenge, I know where I'd rather be sitting.
Right.
I know where I'd rather be sitting while we're waiting it out. So they're looking to us to, I think, be some light at the end of everything that's going on. Yeah. And most of the time we're sitting on the, nothing's selling, and I don't know when anything's going to be selling again. If my doctor said, you know what, well, you have this condition and I don't know if I can help you or not, like, he probably wouldn't be my.
You're calling somebody else for another opinion, right?
Yeah. So you're not lying, but you have to be passionate about what you're doing. And if you don't believe in it, then maybe get out of it, because the challenge is real, but they don't need you to tell them that. The news is telling them that every day.
Right.
So they need you to say, look, and I will go to my customers even today, and I am very honest. Look, I don't know if it's going to be 30 days or, with the way things are going right now, 4 months or 5 months. I have that conversation up front. But I can tell you, I won't be sitting on my hands waiting to see for somebody to come and see that sign. Right. I'm still going to continue the marketing that I'm doing. I'm still going to put myself out there for you. And if you're not there, you can't be seen. Yeah. So let's get out there and let's...
And that's really the type of market that it is right now. I mean, if you want to sell it in 30 days, we could probably come up with a price that will sell it in 30 days.
Yeah. And you're not going to like the price. But
you may or may not like the price, but again, having that conversation, like you said, they need to be near the grandkids and they want to be by them right now. We've had many discussions recently that, every deal has got some hair to it. There, might be pre-occupancy. It might be, the sellers they have it listed for sale. We've got an offer, but they need to stay in another month. So we're going to have a 60-day closing or something like that, 90-day closing or something like that. Everyone's got some extra deal.
Every deal, everyone.
And I really think, actually, I think my wife might have said it the other day, but we know the statistics for 24 were that 70-something% of the agents didn't even close a deal in 24, and I've seen agents, who are doing well do even better here recently. Other agents that were doing what we would think were equally well are having a rough time, and if I was to guess, because we don't know any statistics, we're not a fly on the wall, but it's having these conversations to find out the real why. Right. There's a client we've been working with, an agent for probably 6 months now. We haven't talked recently because they're waiting for the rates to drop to the low fives, and it's like. That's just not going to, if you wait, then you're going to stay in that condo. You're young, you have the money, you make good money, you have savings. Negotiate a buy down. That'll give you 2 years of the payment you're looking for, and hopefully sometimes during the 2 years. If rates come down, and then you can jump out of that and you'll get that escrow money back from the buy down. I mean, there's so many different ways we have to be a little creative, but it's having those conversations that you're talking about.
Absolutely. And again, when rates were higher, because we had people saying that even 2 years ago, when rates are higher, then if it's something you want and you're in a position to buy it now and then refinance later. Yeah. But to put your life on hold because you're waiting for a rate that might go down.
You have no control over.
That you have no control over. No control over. And so it's like people have to, and this is the human side of it, it's so important knowing people's motivation up front. And that's one of the first things I ask. And if it's one of those, we're looking at the right thing, then that. But when it's like a health thing or something, like let's talk about, so tell me how you got here. Like, what made you decide today that you want to sell? Like, what's your motivation? That lets you know if that person is a C client or an A client, one that you need to work really right now.
They're hot to trot.
Or the other one is just, you know what, they can wait it out because they hadn't planned to do anything for 3 to 5 years, and they're just hoping, hey, if I put my house on at this price. And the other thing is, again, knowing there are so many people that in order to get the listing will let the seller dictate the price. If you know your craft and you know your homework, I usually go in with a range. I have had people who want to be so far above that range, I won't take the listing. I won't take the listing. And then I end up getting them because I stood up to them. But when you buckle to everything, what does that say to your seller about what's going to happen when you become their negotiator? Yeah. They're going to
I saw a reel on that the other day. Your guy said it really well. It's like, so they asked for you to cut your commissions, and you just buckle down and say, okay, I'll do it for that, versus turning it back on them and say, do you want me to buckle down like this when I do your negotiation? Same phrase, which this that just made me lose my thought. I want to go somewhere else with you. conversation that you're having, it's not necessarily, well, I guess it could be a tough conversation, but you're asking open-ended questions to your buyers and sellers to create a conversation, because these are things you need to know to position them in the best possible way,
Right.
whether they're selling or buying.
Right.
Do they have, how much cash you have available to buy this home? Okay, well, we need some seller concessions to make this happen. The seller, we've made an offer on another home, or our new construction home's about where we need to close this like quickly.
Right.
Well, how you market that, how you price it, you need to have those conversations.
Sure.
And I would guesstimate of the 70% of those agents who did not do a deal last year, but were actually trying to actively get deals, they're not going the distance on those conversations. Asking some of those open-ended questions. Why? Why are you wanting to move now? Why do you need to move over there? And being obviously on the mortgage side, I know there's a lot of agents afraid to ask some standardized financial, like, okay, well, how much of a down payment do you have saved up for? And it's not necessarily how much money you have. It's how much are you willing to put into this.
Are you cash or financing? And what would you be looking to put down? Are you 20%, 10%?
Yeah.
Having those conversations, and people feel like, I think it's intrusive or personal. Well, it would be personal for somebody from the grocery store to come up and say, hey, how much did you put down on your house?
Right,
but
exactly.
when they're calling you as a professional, those are questions that they expect to be asked.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's consistently said by my customers is they find that I'm very thorough. And I can tell you, and I don't know why the men, but so many men, clients, have asked me, do you play chess? Because you have the answers, and not even at the listing point, but
or did you go to law school,
even through
right?
the process, they'll say, do you play chess? Because it's amazing how you anticipate. Like, and one of the things, like you say, talk about just like with the listings or how long you may be on, I go through the whole process. When we get that contract, this is what happens, or even with the listing, this is what happens in the process. You have a home inspection, and somebody's going to give us 25 pages of whatever. Even with a buyer, we don't ask for the whole 25 pages. Typically, you ask for the major items, or as the market shifts. Before, everybody was, we had so many as-is offers. It's up to you to explain to them. They'll probably won't ask for anything, or this is. Look, if you want that property because 5 other people may come for it, it would be probably to your advantage not to ask, because then you have a stronger. Most people don't talk. They let people just wing it, and it's like it doesn't come up until later. And even customers, when I have conversations with them about their home inspections, and we have it up front before they're looking at that 25 pages, they remember that we've already had that conversation. We don't look. An inspector is going to find 25 pages worth of everything, because they all do. That's their job, to find every loose knob, whatever. Typically,
To show you they're doing their job.
To show you they're doing the job. Typically, if you want this home, if certainly something major comes up or whatever, but typically you don't ask. And I'll get like newer agents, oh my gosh, that'll send, and they have highlighted every single thing. And of course it gets rejected, but that's an agent that did not have that conversation.
Yeah.
So they are not running the business. They are not being the professional. That person hired you.
They're
for
being
a reason.
reactive instead of proactive.
Yeah, and the person hired you for a reason, and it's like they will try to push back up. But if you know your worth, it is what it is. And I think having the confidence about your business, even if you don't have confidence in anything else, the only way to get that confidence is to do the work and to feel good about what you're talking about, and know that you know what you're talking about.
I think if anything a newer agent can take from this, one, you got to build your confidence up through content, reading, going to classes and so forth. Whatever it is, maybe it's mentoring with somebody, shadowing somebody, being part of a team so you are collaborating on a daily basis, but realizing you are the professional. And if you're maybe you're only on your first 4 or 5 sales, and some of these negotiations, like you've learned over time how to handle that report, but you're willing to share it to the person who just started. Is to actually listen to what you're saying on how to handle that situation, because you are looked on as the same professional that person buying with you and you're on your first year versus you in your 20th year,
Right.
they still look to you the same way.
But
you are the real estate professional.
They look at you exactly, and it's how you show up at that table. I remember one of my first deals, and I had probably been in the business 6 months, and it's so funny. So I interviewed with these people, and a wonderful couple, and had all my facts and information on the neighborhood and what's going on in the economy and all of that. And I remember the husband saying, and he must have said it 2 or 3 times, the husband and wife, but I remember the husband saying 2 or 3 times, based off everything you're saying, I think my wife would agree, we want to go with you. And he said something like, we really wanted somebody who was experienced in the business, had been around for a while. We didn't want a new agent, blah, blah. He said that 3 or 4 times. So, and again, I don't go, I'm a new agent. So I didn't say that.
Right.
But knowing the couple, I knew they knew a lot of people that I knew. And so right before I pulled out the listing agreement for them to sign, and I said, guys, I said, I would like to clarify something. And I said,
but they might find out later, right?
Yeah, his name is Mark. And be transparent. And I said, you know what, Mark? I said, you've said a couple times that you wanted an experienced agent. You didn't want to work with a new agent. And I said, I just feel an obligation that I need to share with you that I've only been in the business for 6 months. And I said, but I do want you to know, although I'm new to real estate, I'm not new to business. And that is how I run my my business as a business. So I am not new to business. And so his comment was, well, first of all, he said, thank you for being honest about it. He said, but Sharon, if I couldn't tell that you were a new agent, you're the person we're going with.
Yeah.
He said, because I would have never thought you've only been in this business for 6 months. I said, we know a lot of the same people, and I didn't want them to say, oh, she just got in the business, and you've said it. And I said, and typically I don't lead with that. I'm a new agent. And I even tell new agents, don't lead with that. If you know your stuff, sometimes they'll say, how many homes have you sold? And if you've not sold any, say, you know what, it'll be my pleasure to have yours be the first one. But if they feel you know what you're talking about at that table, very few will turn their back on you because you're not a seasoned agent. Sometimes they think, you know what, maybe that new agent will be hungry enough to go out there and get this job done. So it's what they feel from you. It's not, the numbers count at a certain level, but initially, that's not.
Later on in your career, you'll get deals from your rateagent.com or whatever it's called. Someone will call you because they saw a review. Right. All right, I want to finish with this. It was kind of something I prepped you before the show because I feel real estate agents need grit. What noise coming from? Is that my phone? All right. Grit is very important, and I always promote Angela Duckworth's book. But the LLC, the love, the laughter, and the consistency. Why do you love real estate?
I love real estate, for me, is because I feel like, first of all, I'm a very social person, and I love people. And I love being able to help people realize their dream or helping people through a difficult time. That is just the nature of who I am. So I feel like, to me, I tell people, it feels like for me, and it doesn't for everybody, but it feels like almost a ministry. Like it's really caring about people. Somebody's lost their husband. Like, I feel that pain with them. And if I can do something to make their life a little bit easier, if somebody just got married, like, I'm excited about the feeling of somebody having a first home. For me, it's very personal. I just love people, always have, and the money will come. Yeah. That's like secondary. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm a caring person, and that's just who I am.
Right. Yeah. And the whole point is, grit. If you don't love what you do, you're going on to do something else. Yeah. You've got to find what you love, and if you really love what you do, you generally are fairly successful at it.
Yeah. And I truly, of all the jobs I've had, I really feel like they all led me here with all the transferring. When I say I love it so much that I tell my friends at 70, make me retire. Now I'm moving. I'm like at 75, maybe at 75, make me retire, because I don't see myself leaving this business. But
you can hire the 30-year-old agent to go show the houses. You can take the referral and go on. So, the laughter part. Again, go back into grit in our life. We experience things, setbacks, curveballs. I'm sure you've had some crazy stuff just happened because crazy stuff happens in real
right.
estate that really sets you apart. But today you laugh about it
Yes.
in the cocktail bar. Tell us an experience you've had.
This is funny. Like, people have said that they didn't realize I had a funny side, right? Because I'm very serious when it comes to business. Very serious with negotiation, everything, kind but very serious. And I've had several situations, but most of my customers have been amazing, and I think it's just because I allow people to have bad days and things, and I don't take it personal. If you're doing what you need to do, then that person being furious about there's nobody buying, no matter what they say, I'm not offended. I understand their frustration. But one that was funny is one of my customers, very serious guy. I'm very serious, and met with his wife several times, and we were in a deal, and he was being a little bit unreasonable. I feel like the buyer was being very fair in price. His wife felt like the buyer was being very fair in price, and so we had gotten along, got the deal all set, and something came back with the home inspection. This was a few years ago. Something came back with the home inspection. And it was really something that nobody would have known. He wouldn't have known, the buyer wouldn't have known, but the inspection revealed it. Mm-hmm. And he's like, tell them before I do that, I will pull this deal. And it probably was like a $5,000 issue on an $800,000 home. Mm-hmm. You tell him I will pull this deal, and and he's ranting and he's raving. And again, very serious and like, Bruce, I understand where you're coming from, whatever, but however, whatever. And so he just kept going. And so his wife she's all embarrassed, and I'm sitting there. And I just got quiet and let him talk. Mm-hmm. And then he just stopped, and he was like, literally, I will pull it. I will pull, and I mean it, because he realized that both of us are being quiet. And so I said, Bruce, I understand your frustration, but I'd like to ask you if you would consider doing one thing for me. And he's like, what is it? And I said, I'm going to leave, but I'd like you to have 2 glasses of wine and call me in the morning. His face, like, it took a minute, and then after about 30 seconds, his wife and I, we laughed so hard. Like, when I tell you, we didn't know if Bruce was going to strangle me or whatever. I said, Bruce, because it's like I wanted to say, you are dead wrong about this, and right. You are going to shoot yourself in the foot if you do this. And I said, I'd like for you to have 2 glasses of wine and call me in the morning. Right. And I was like to have like your doctor take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning. Yeah. And I said, and I promise, if you do this and you call me in the morning, 8 o'clock, I will be on that phone and I will cancel this deal for you. But not until, and they were always offering me wine, and I'm not a drinker, so I didn't drink wine. Right. And I was like, that's all I ask. And he just looked like, are you serious? And so his wife said something like, why don't we just table this for tonight? But in all seriousness, let's table this for tonight. You call me in the morning and say it's done, it's done. Yeah. Even at the table, of course he called and he was fine, mm-hmm. But even at the closing table, he was like, he even said to the closing attorney, we all laughed about it. He goes, thank you for having the guts or the grit to say that to me. He said, I don't know anybody else who would have said that. And I said it nice, and I said it with a smile, and she and I laughed so hard. I couldn't even believe I said it, because I'm not, and then I did have one other customer, because I don't swear.
That's true. That's a high level professionalism.
Yeah.
Cool you were a cool customer. Yeah. You let him go off, but one thing we know in real estate, nothing happens that quickly. Mm-hmm. And especially if it's after 5 o'clock, right. Nothing's happening until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Right. That was a cool.
It was.
Yeah.
But telling him to have the wine, it was so, because he's never seen me, but it lets him know, I think you are totally off your rocker. And we've laughed about it. Yeah. I think you're totally off your rocker. And then I had another one that was very difficult. And when I say I don't swear, I do not at all. But this one particular customer, he was so out of line. And I said, you know what? The way I see this right now, this is nothing but a pissing contest.
Mm.
He looked, because again, he never heard me, because like the things that were going back and forth between, and it's like, never thought I'd be sitting here trying to figure out who can,
yeah,
you know, and so his face again, but I think it was just in every agent, you can't say, you've got to know your customer. You can't just say things like that to everybody. You can't.
Yeah.
But I think when they see how serious I am and how I've handled everything, there is some weight to what I say. And like when you are just gone over the top, right? Some you've got to know when to back off. And I've probably in 20 years only had 2 customers that I've let go. Mm. And the only, 2 that let me go, right? Because we could not have, you know.
Well, when you've taken the time and the due diligence that we've talked about here for the last hour, of all the things that you're doing in the professionalism, you're digging deep with the questions, you're knowing the whys and everything. You have, I don't want to say you've closed them in, but you've answered 99% of the quiz, and you got 99, and now you're on the 100th question, the last question, and at that point, you have the ability to say, you know what, I can answer this one wrong because I got 99% right. And because you come in with that kind of presence, with that kind of knowledge, you pour that experience into them, or at least make them perceive that you have that experience, and, you know, and because you've done the
genuine. And that part that's key, because it is genuine. You know, it is a genuine concern and caring. I'm not ever going to tell somebody how to spend their money, but it's like, I look at it from such a big picture, and when I can lay out the economy is doing this, your neighbor's house is doing this is why I did that, that's why I did that. Nobody wants to hear their house. Everybody thinks they have the prettiest house in the planet, and so even to say to them, even when they come up with these ridiculous numbers, sometimes to say, look, you know your house better than I do. Give me something based off of what I've come up with here, and I've comped you against this, and tell me what I'm not seeing. Tell me what I'm not seeing.
Yeah. Then that's a reality question.
That would put us there. Yeah. Like, because I don't know what's behind the walls. I don't know how you tell me how you love living in the. Write some things out. You can't. 9 times out of 10, you're not coming up. And probably one of my highest compliments, and it will probably end on this, but one of the highest compliments is, for me, again, is knowing your customer. I had a sale, a multi-million-dollar sale, seller going through the divorce, buyer. And the buyer refused to pay the price. The seller couldn't take the price because of what she was going through. And so, and you don't often do this, but again, just having some empathy and understanding of these 2 people, I chose to bring them together, which is rare. I said to the doctor, I said, doctor, I said, typically I don't do this, but I would like for you to have a conversation with her, and I'd like for her to have a conversation with you, because I know where both of you are, but I think if you have that conversation, you'll see she's not trying to pull a fast one, and maybe it'll help her understand you. Long story short, the doctor would not budge from the price because that was his principle, but he paid my $52,000 commission. He said, you know what, we have a good agent. And the fact that she thought enough to bring us together. So he did see her pain. And he said, even though I see and I understand, and she cried, and it was an older lady, and she cried. But he saw this, she wasn't trying to pull a fast one. So the emotion came in it, and it was the most beautiful thing. Now, they were only $30,000 apart. And this is a story that just touches me because of the hearts of people. They were $30,000 apart. He said right there standing in her kitchen, he says, you know what, I will not pay higher than what I've said, but I will pay our agent's commission. So he didn't know from both sides what we negotiated, but the commission was 52. So I said, I got them both in the kitchen, and I said, excuse me, I said to her, am I allowed to say what the full commission is? And I said, doctor, I said, my commission is $52,000 on this. Are you saying that you will pay $30,000 of that and she pays the difference, or you'll pay half of that? He says, no, I will pay your whole commission. He said, because we have a good agent that you would think to do this. You have worked hard for this. So
he took it off the seller's plate.
He took it off the whole thing off the seller's plate.
Wow.
All he had to do was give her $30,000 more.
Right.
He took it off her plate. But again, Some people would have been like, okay, and then you got to deal with the problem later. I believe in dealing with it. We're on the spot. I didn't want to have to call her and say, oh, I talked him out of. Can we come to an understanding? May I share with him just feeling people, but for him to do that, it touched me.
Yeah.
That I was right in bringing the two together, but what it did for her and what it did for him, it was a very touching moment. It was a very touching moment for me. So I think transparency. I think people, when you work hard for people, and I was really shocked that he did it. I think, but when you work hard for people, and they can see there's no shenanigans, and that was the one thing that bothered me about real estate. Is so often we operate as used car salespeople, and it really messes up the profession for everybody else. And so I was determined to come out authentically, and to kind of change that dynamic.
That mindset.
Mindset. Yeah.
Sharon, I appreciate you coming on today.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. It was a great show.
Thank you
Great.
for having
Really,
me.
really,
I enjoyed it.
really impactful. We'll cut